Welcome. There is nowhere you need to be right now, and nothing you need to do but rest. Let your breathing slow. Let your shoulders sink into whatever is holding you, and let today loosen its grip just a little. Tonight we walk backward through the evening hours of old cities, listening to sounds that once drifted through stone streets long before electric light. In Rome, as the sun lowers, a trumpet call rises from the city gates. The bronze note travels over rooftops, and soldiers swing the heavy gates shut for the night, sealing the city until morning. In Pompeii, shopkeepers are closing for the night. Wooden shutters slide down over stone counters along the busy street, called the Via dell'Abbondanza. Each shopkeeper drops a heavy bolt into place, the wood settling with a low thud against stone. Oil lamps are pinched out one by one inside. Above the rooftops, Vesuvius stands dark and unremarkable against the fading sky, its slopes still green with vineyards. In Athens, the agora is emptying. A bronze bell rings out across the open square, and merchants begin gathering their unsold pottery and cloth into baskets. Stalls that sold olives, fish, and painted vases stand bare within minutes. The sound of the bell fades against the marble columns of the Stoa, and the marketplace, so loud only an hour before, settles into stillness beneath the darkening sky. In Babylon, gongs sound from the top of the great ziggurat. The deep tone rolls across flat rooftops and mud-brick lanes, marking the beginning of the night watch. Priests atop the stepped tower turn toward the darkening horizon, where the Euphrates catches the last light. Below, guards take their positions along the processional way, and the city's clay-lined streets grow quiet beneath a sky filling slowly with stars. In Nineveh, drums sound along the city walls. The rhythm passes from tower to tower as massive gates are drawn shut for the night. Guards check the iron-bound wood with torches, their shadows stretching long across the stone. The Assyrian capital, ringed by walls, said to have taken years to raise, settles into darkness as the drumbeats fade into the desert wind beyond. In Jerusalem, a shofar sounds from the temple walls. The ram's horn call rises over the hills, announcing the arrival of the Sabbath at sunset. Families in narrow stone courtyards set down their tools and gather indoors. Oil lamps are lit one by one in small windows across the city. The long note of the shofar fades slowly into the cooling evening air, and the streets grow still. In Alexandria, fire crackles atop the great lighthouse. Keepers feed the flame with oil and wood, and the light begins its long climb into the darkening sky. Below, the harbor grows quiet as fishing boats are tied along the stone quay. The Pharos, one of the tallest structures in the ancient world, throws a slow, steady glow across the water, guiding the last ships safely toward shore. In Carthage, the harbor chains rattle shut. Heavy bronze links are drawn taut across the entrance to the circular military port, sealing it from the open sea. The sound echoes off the stone walls surrounding the harbor basin. Sailors on anchored ships hear the chains settle into place, a familiar signal that the working day has ended and the fleet rests until morning. In bells ring for the evening offering. The sound drifts from the temple platform down into the mud-brick lanes below, where priests carry small vessels of oil and grain toward the sanctuary. Worshippers pause in doorways to listen. The great ziggurat of Ur, already old by the time of Abraham according to later tradition, stands dark against a sky just beginning to fill with stars. In Ephesus, the great theater empties. Thousands of sandaled feet move down the stone tiers and out through the arched passages, their footsteps echoing off marble long after the last speaker has finished. The sound fades gradually as the crowd disperses along the wide street leading toward the harbor. Behind them, the empty theater holds only silence and the last warmth of the stone seats. Feel your breath now, how it moves without your help, in and out, like tide against a shore that never hurries. Let the inhale come easy, and let the exhale stretch a little longer than before. Each breath out can carry a small weight away with it, the day's noise, its errands, its small frictions. There is no pace to keep, only this: breathe in, and let go a little more than you did the time before. In the great city of Chang'an, drums sound from the tall wooden tower at the heart of the capital. Their deep beats roll across the grid of walled wards, signaling that the gates are closing for the night. Merchants hurry the last carts through narrow gateways before the heavy doors swing shut. Chang'an, one of the largest cities in the world during the Tang dynasty, falls into an orderly hush as its drumbeats fade into the darkening streets. Across the hills of Kyoto, temple bells toll as twilight settles over the city. The bronze bells, some cast centuries earlier, are struck slowly by monks preparing for the evening stillness. Their low tones drift over tiled rooftops and through gardens already dimming into shadow. Wooden temple halls, fragrant with incense smoke, grow quiet as the last light fades behind the eastern hills. In Constantinople, church bells ring out for the Vespers hour. Their sound rolls across the domes of the city, calling worshippers from workshops and marketplaces toward candlelit naves. Byzantine sailors in the Golden Horn pause their work to listen. The bells fade slowly into the growing dusk, leaving behind only the murmur of prayer drifting from open church doors. In Damascus, the call to prayer rises over the fading noise of the market. Merchants begin folding their cloth and stacking their brass wares as the muezzin's voice carries from a nearby minaret. The two sounds blend for a moment, human bargaining and sacred call, before the market falls quiet. Lanterns are lit one by one along the covered souk as the evening settles in. Along the Tigris River in Baghdad, boatmen sing softly as the day comes to its end. Their voices carry over the slow-moving water as reed boats and wooden ferries are tied along muddy banks. The songs mark the close of trade for the day, passed down through generations of river workers. Lanterns on the far bank begin to glow, reflected faintly in the dark current below. At Teotihuacan, conch shell trumpets sound to mark the ritual dusk. Priests atop the great pyramids raise the shells to their lips, and the low note rolls across the wide avenue known in later centuries as the Avenue of the Dead. Torches are lit along stone platforms as the sky deepens overhead. The sound fades slowly into the cooling air of the high central valley. In Tenochtitlan, drums echo across the canals as the sun sets. The sound rolls from the central temple precinct out over the floating gardens and quiet waterways. Canoes glide home along narrow channels lit by torchlight. The drumming marks the close of ceremonies performed since morning, its rhythm settling gradually into the calm of the darkening lake city. At Cahokia, chanting rises from the great earthen mounds as dusk falls over the Mississippi floodplain. Voices carry across the wide central plaza where thousands once gathered for ceremony. Cooking fires flicker at the base of the mounds as families prepare for the evening. The chant fades slowly into the darkening grasslands surrounding the city's earthworks. At Angkor, temple bells fade as monks withdraw for the night. Their footsteps grow quiet along the long stone causeways leading toward the sanctuaries. Carved towers, still catching the last orange light, begin to blend into the darkening jungle canopy beyond the moat. The sound of insects slowly replaces the last echo of bronze. Persepolis changes its palace guard as midnight settles over the terraces. Bronze-tipped spears click against stone floors, and armor plates knock softly with each turning step. Torchlight catches the carved bulls and winged figures lining the great staircase. The old watch withdraws toward their quarters, while the new watch takes its place beneath the columned hall. Let your body grow heavy now, one part at a time. Feel your feet settle into the mattress, loose and unmoving. Let that heaviness climb into your legs, your hips, your lower back, each part sinking a little deeper than before. Your shoulders release their hold, your arms grow full and still, and your head rests like a stone set down after a long journey. There is only this weight now, warm and unmoving, holding you exactly where you are. In a Roman tavern, voices rise and fall over cups of watered wine, dice rattle across a wooden counter, and someone calls out the score. Oil lamps flicker along the walls where painted scenes of harbor life have faded with years of smoke. Outside, the street has grown still, but inside the small room stays warm with talk and laughter well past sundown. At Pompeii's public baths, the last bathers linger before closing. Water slaps gently against marble basins as attendants gather towels and extinguish lamps one by one. Steam still rises faintly from the heated pools beneath the vaulted ceiling. Footsteps echo off tiled floors as the final voices trail out into the cooling street. In Athens, guests at a symposium lift their voices in scholia. The short drinking songs passed from one couch to the next. Wine is mixed with water in wide clay bowls set at the room's center. A lyre is handed around along with the singing, each guest adding a line before passing it on. The sound carries faintly through open shutters into the sleeping street below. At Corinth's harbor, waves creak against the mooring ropes of resting ships. Wooden hulls knock lightly against the stone quay with each small swell. A lantern sways from a mast, its light rocking slowly across the dark water. Somewhere along the docks, a rope groans as it tightens and loosens with the tide. In Sparta, the barracks stay silent, but for the distant sound of flute drills carried on the night air. Young men sleep in close rows within bare stone rooms, their training clothes folded nearby. Far off, a flute practices the same short phrase again and again, preparing for tomorrow's march. The sound drifts thin and steady across the darkened training grounds. At Mycenae, hearth fires crackle inside the great Megaron Hall. Smoke rises toward an opening in the roof, carrying the scent of burning oak into the night sky. Painted plaster walls glow faintly in the firelight, showing traces of hunting scenes long worn by years of smoke. Warriors and household members sit near the flames, their voices low beneath the crackle of burning wood. Along the trade routes near Palmyra, camels grumble as merchants settle their caravan for the night. Packs of silk, spice, and glassware are unloaded and stacked beside cooling sand. Fires are lit between the tents, and the low complaint of resting camels mixes with the murmur of traders counting their goods. Stars appear sharp and close above the open desert. In Petra, laughter echoes through chambers carved directly into rose-colored rock. Travelers who have crossed the desert rest inside cool stone rooms, lit by small oil lamps. Their voices bounce off carved facades, built centuries earlier by the Nabatean people who first shaped the city from sandstone cliffs. Outside, the narrow canyon entrance stands dark and silent under a thin slice of moon. Inside the palace at Ctesiphon, lute music rises for a royal feast held in honor of distant guests. Strings are plucked in careful measure, filling vaulted halls decorated with stucco and painted plaster. Servants move between tables bearing silver trays, while the Sasanian court listens beneath high-arched ceilings. Beyond thick walls, the Tigris keeps its own rhythm, unheard by those inside. Metal rings out across Xianyang as armory doors open for the change of night guards. Spears and shields are handed from one soldier to another beneath torchlight. Boots strike packed earth in steady rhythm along the walls of the old Qin capital. Somewhere beyond the barracks, the vast pits of clay soldiers stand buried and still, unaware of the living ones marching above them. Listen for a moment to the wind moving through a distant doorway, arriving and pulling away again like breath. It has no place to be, and neither do you. Let your shoulders sink a little further into whatever holds them. The sound rises, fades, rises again, asking nothing of you but to stay right where you are, drifting with it. Bronze chimes sound from a temple rooftop in Nuyonyang as evening prayers begin. Monks move along covered walkways, lit by paper lanterns swaying on their hooks. The chimes carry a thin, layered tone across tiled courtyards and carved stone lions. Incense smoke drifts upward past painted beams, curling into a sky, already deepening toward true dark. In Nara, monks gather within wooden temple halls to recite sutras before the day closes. Their voices move together in low, even chant, rising and falling beneath heavy beams darkened by centuries of lamp smoke. Paper screens glow faintly from candlelight within. When the chanting ends, sandals are set aside, and sleeping mats are unrolled along the temple floor. At Anuradhapura, elephants trumpet as they move through the streets during an evening procession. Draped in cloth and carrying lanterns upon their backs, they follow a path toward the great stupas rising pale against the darkening sky. Drums beat somewhere ahead, and the crowd's murmur mixes with the deep, resonant calls of the animals themselves. Torches line the roadside, throwing long shifting light across stone terraces. Deep in the jungle surrounding Tikal, howler monkeys call out across plazas, washed in moonlight. Their voices roll between the stone temples, like something both close and impossibly far away. Stairways climb into darkness above the tree line, silent except for that distant, echoing chorus. Below, the plaza stones still hold faint warmth from the day's sun. At Chichen Itza, the great ball court stands empty beneath the night sky, its long stone walls catching every faint echo. During the day, players struck a heavy rubber ball between carved stone rings, watched by crowds pressed along the terraces. Now only wind moves through the passage, and a dropped pebble might roll the entire length of the court, its small sound stretching on and on. Near the stone enclosures of Great Zimbabwe, cattle low softly within their walled pens for the night. The great granite walls, built without mortar, curve around the herds like a protective arm. Herders check the gates once more before returning to their fires. Somewhere above, the wall's rounded tower stands dark against the sky filling with stars. Along the edges of Timbuktu, camel bells grow fainter as a caravan finally comes to rest for the night. Traders unload bundles of salt and cloth beside low mud brick walls, their voices dropping as fires are lit. The scholar's city, known for its libraries and clay, walled mosques, settles into stillness beyond the caravan's edge. Sand still holds the day's warmth beneath tired, folded legs. Along the ghats of Varanasi, hymns rise from clusters of worshippers gathered near the water's edge. Small clay lamps drift out onto the river Ganges, their flames trembling but staying lit as they float past stone steps worn smooth by centuries of feet. Voices overlap in call and response, some low, some rising, blending with temple bells further up the bank. The current carries both light and sound downstream together. Inside the royal court of Pataliputra, musicians perform for the king beneath painted wooden pillars. Drums, flutes, and stringed instruments called venas weave together in careful rhythm, their sound filling the hall while attendants stand along the walls. Oil lamps flicker across gilded surfaces, and the scent of sandalwood drifts through the room. The king listens from a raised seat, his advisers seated near him in rows. At Mohenjo-daro, the potter's wheels stop turning as evening work comes to an end. Clay dust settles across the workshop floors, and rows of drying pots line the shelves in the dim light. Craftsmen wash their hands in stone basins fed by the city's covered drains, an engineering feat that keeps the streets clean even after dark. The wheels sit motionless now, waiting for morning hands to spin them again. Let warmth begin somewhere small, perhaps in the palms of your hands, resting open and heavy. Let it spread from there into your wrists, then up through your arms, unhurried, like something poured rather than pushed. Feel it reach your shoulders next, loosening whatever they have carried today. Let it move into your chest, your back, your hips, each part receiving its share before passing the warmth along. By the time it reaches your feet, your whole body may feel like it is resting in something like still bath water, warm all the way through, asking nothing of you at all. Rome's night watchmen, called vigils, call out the hours as they patrol empty streets. Their voices echo between tall brick insulae, announcing the passage of time to those still awake behind shuttered windows. Carrying leather buckets in case of fire, they move in small groups along the Sabura's narrow lanes. Dogs bark at their footsteps, then settle again once the watchmen pass. In Pompeii, dogs bark as carts rumble past on their way toward the Forum before dawn deliveries. Wheel ruts, still visible today, were worn deep into the stone streets by centuries of this same nightly traffic. A driver calls softly to his mule, guiding it around the raised stepping stones used to cross flooded roads. Somewhere behind a shuttered doorway, a child stirs briefly, then falls back asleep. Babylon's priests chant to the god Marduk during midnight rites, held within the ziggurat's upper chambers. Incense smoke curls upward, past painted brick reliefs of lions and dragons, and bronze lamps mark the stairway leading to the sacred platform. The chant repeats in careful cadence, following patterns recorded on clay tablets kept by temple scribes. Outside, the city below lies dark except for scattered watchfires along the walls. Within the royal menagerie of Nineveh, caged lions roar somewhere behind thick stone walls. King Ashurbanipal kept such animals for hunting displays and for the prestige of ruling over creatures brought from distant lands. Their calls carry across the palace grounds, mixing with the rustle of caged birds and the murmur of night guards stationed nearby. The sound fades into the wider stillness of the sleeping city beyond the palace gates. In the great library of Alexandria, scribes work on by the light of flickering oil lamps. Rolls of papyrus are stacked along shelves that line room after room, each one labeled with care by librarians trained in careful cataloging. A scribe copies a Greek text by hand, checking his work against an older, worn scroll beside him. The lamp's flame throws long shadows across walls filled with more knowledge than any single person could read in a lifetime. At the temple in Jerusalem, guards recite psalms during their midnight rounds along the outer courtyards. Their voices stay low, carrying just far enough to mark the passing watch to those inside the walls. Stone columns rise around them, catching the glow of oil lamps set into recessed niches. Beyond the temple's outer gate, the city rests in silence, its rooftops dark beneath a sky heavy with stars. Ephesus keeps a rite for the moon inside the Temple of Artemis, one of the wonders named by ancient travelers. Priestesses known as the Melissae move between marble columns taller than any house in the city below. A hand-pulled bell marks each stage of the ceremony, its tone rolling out across the sacred grove. Moonlight falls through open colonnades onto floors worn smooth by centuries of bare feet. Carthage's circular harbor holds its warships still through the dark hours. Triremes rest tied to stone quays built for the city's navy, their oars stacked and their hulls rocking with the tide. Waves slap gently against wood and rope, the only motion in a harbor otherwise closed for the night. Watchtowers along the harbor mouth stand dark, their lookouts listening more than watching. Ir's ziggurat holds a drum rite for the moon god Nana, patron of the ancient city. Priests climb the staircase built into the temple's face, drum beats rising with each level they pass. Records kept on clay tablets describe such nights as tied to the moon's changing phases, a calendar older than writing itself. Below the ziggurat, mud brick houses stand dark, their courtyards empty under the same watching sky. Damascus's night watch moves through streets built long before the empires that later claimed the city. Each guard's sandals strike the paving stones in steady rhythm, the sound carrying between shuttered houses. Oil lamps burn low in a few doorways, left by families who trust the watch to keep order. The old covered markets, silent now, wait for morning behind heavy wooden doors. Picture a lamp burning low in an empty room, its flame narrowing until it becomes a single glowing point. That small light asks nothing of you, only that you watch it grow smaller. Let your shoulders sink further into whatever holds you now. Each breath you take makes the light dim a little more, until it becomes no more than a memory of brightness, and then not even that. Baghdad's House of Wisdom keeps its lamps burning well past midnight. Scholars gathered under the Abbasid Caliph speak in hushed voices over manuscripts brought from Greece, Persia, and India. Their words move between translation and argument, weighing one philosopher's claim against another's. Around them, shelves of copied texts rise toward a ceiling painted with geometric patterns, catching the low light of clay lamps. Chang'an obeys its curfew drums without exception. Officials of the Tang court have ordered the great drum towers to sound at fixed hours, forbidding movement through the grid of avenues once the beats begin. Wooden watchmen's clappers echo down empty boulevards, wide enough for 10 carriages abreast. Anyone caught outside without a lantern risks arrest, so the world's largest city holds itself still until dawn. Kyoto's foxes call out from the shadowed edges of palace gardens. The animals are linked in local belief to Inari, a spirit associated with rice and prosperity, and their sharp barks carry easily across still ponds and raked gravel paths. Court attendants asleep in wooden halls rarely stir at the sound, familiar as it is. Beyond the garden walls, the wider city keeps its own hush, broken only by these small voices from the dark. Constantinople's great basilica rings its bells for the matins hour. The sound rolls out over the hippodrome and down toward the harbor, marking the first of the day's fixed prayers according to Byzantine custom. Monks and clergy rise from narrow cells to answer the call, their sandals echoing on marble floors worn smooth by generations before them. Outside, the city's domes catch the first hint of gray easing into the eastern sky. Teotihuacan's obsidian workshops fall silent as wind moves through the great pyramids. Craftsmen who spend their days shaping blades and mirrors from volcanic glass have long since gone home to rest. The wind finds its way through empty passages along the Avenue of the Dead, producing a low whistle that seems to rise from the stone itself. No torches burn near the pyramids tonight, leaving their outlines dark against a sky full of unfamiliar stars. Tenochtitlan's canals hold countless frogs, and their voices rise together in the still water beneath the causeways. The Aztec capital rests on an island laced with waterways, and by night these small creatures fill the dark with an unbroken chorus. Canoes lie tied at wooden posts, empty until morning trade resumes. Across the water, a temple silhouette breaks the horizon, but no drum sounds now, only the frogs and the lapping of black water against stone. Cahokia's great earthen mounds host owls that call from their high, grassy tops. This city along the Mississippi River rose with dozens of such mounds, built by hand over generations for ceremony and burial. At night the birds perch where priests once stood, their low calls carrying across the flattened plaza below. Wooden posts marking a great circle stand nearby, holding their places in silence until the sun returns. Angkor's crickets take over where the daylight sounds have gone. Stone corridors built for kings now carry only their steady churring, echoing off carved walls lined with dancing figures worn smooth by centuries of touch. Monks who tend the temple grounds have long since retired to modest quarters nearby. The insect sound fills every gallery equally, as if the temple itself had begun to hum. Persepolis stations guards who pass their spears from hand to hand during the changing of the watch, and the metal clinks softly against itself in the cold mountain air. The Persian palace complex, built by Darius and expanded by his successors, rises on a great stone terrace above the plain. Torchlight catches on carved reliefs of tribute, bearers lining the staircases. Each watch change repeats the same small sound, marking the hours as reliably as any bell. Behind closed eyes now, the day's colors are already fading to gray. Let the jaw loosen, let the teeth part just slightly. Let the whole lower face grow heavy and still. There is no need to hold any expression at all. The eyelids rest without effort, and behind them, only dim shapes drift, slow and formless, asking nothing of you. Palmyra's jackals call to one another somewhere past the city's outer walls. This trading city in the Syrian desert, built rich on the caravan routes between Rome and Persia, sleeps behind colonnades that stretch for a great distance under the stars. The animals stay clear of torchlit gates, but their voices carry easily over open sand. Merchants resting near their goods barely notice, having long grown used to the desert's night sounds. Ctesiphon sits where the river Tigris curls past its palace foundations, and the water's steady gurgle never fully stops day or night. This capital of the Parthian and later Sasanian kings held one of the largest brick arches ever raised without supporting frames, its great hall standing dark and silent now. Reeds along the bank rustle faintly with the current's push. The river has outlasted several dynasties already, and it keeps its own pace regardless of who rules above it. Yanzheng's workshops, once filled with craftsmen shaping clay soldiers by the thousand for an emperor's tomb, lie empty under the moon. Min Shi Huang ordered this vast army built to guard him in death, each figure given its own face and posture. Tonight the kilns stand cold, and the tools rest where hands left them. Moonlight falls across rows of unfinished figures, their expressions caught somewhere between clay and completion. Luoyang's night market keeps its lanterns swinging on tall wooden poles long after the stalls have closed. Wind off the river catches the paper shades, and they creak softly against their frames, a small percussion over otherwise empty streets. Vendors have packed away their silk and pottery until the next dawn's trade begins. What remains is only this slow swinging light, marking out a street with no one left to walk it. Paper lanterns strung along poles above Luoyang's night market keep swinging long after the last stalls have closed. Wind off the river tugs at their painted shades, and each one creaks faintly against its wooden frame. This capital of the Han and later Tang dynasties once drew merchants from as far as Persia to trade silk and spice beneath these same lights. Tonight, the street stands empty. Only the lanterns move. Marking time, no one is left to measure. Sacred deer move freely across Nara's temple grounds, and the bells fixed to some of their collars jingle faintly as they graze in the dark. This city, once the capital of Japan, holds these animals as messengers of the gods according to old belief, and they wander untroubled through stone lanterns and moss-covered paths. Their hooves click against gravel between the shrine buildings. No one hurries them, and no one is awake to listen, but the night itself. Bells ring out across the monastic grounds of Anuradhapura, calling monks from their sleeping mats toward midnight meditation. This city in ancient Sri Lanka held one of the earliest centers of Buddhist practice outside India itself, its dagobas rising pale against the night sky. Robed figures move without speaking along worn paths between shrines. The bronze tone fades slowly into the dark trees, and stillness settles back over the sacred precinct once the last echo died. Somewhere beyond Tickle's stone plazas, a jaguar's low growl rolls through the surrounding jungle canopy. This Maya city, hidden deep within what is now northern Guatemala, rose its temples above a forest that never fully retreated. The animal's call carries across damp air thick with the smell of leaves and stone. Priests and farmers sleeping within the city's earthen homes have long known this sound and let it pass unremarked, one voice among the forest's many. Drops of water fall steadily into Chichen Itza's sacred cenote, each one echoing off limestone walls far below the surface. The Maya considered this deep sinkhole a gateway to the underworld, and offerings of jade, pottery, and gold were lowered into its dark waters over many generations. At night, the sound of dripping is the only voice the cenote gives. Its surface lies unseen beneath a canopy of stars, holding centuries of quiet ceremony within its stone throat. Wind moves low through great Zimbabwe's stone towers, humming faintly against granite blocks fitted without mortar. This kingdom in southern Africa rose wealthy on gold and ivory traded along routes reaching the Indian Ocean coast. The walls, curved and dry, stacked by careful hands, channel the night air into a steady tone that rises and falls like breath. Cattle pens nearby stand empty of sound. Only the wind moves through this place, tracing paths worn smooth by centuries. Across Timbuktu's flat rooftops, desert wind rustles steadily through dried palm leaf thatch laid over mud brick homes. This city, on the edge of the Sahara, once held libraries filled with manuscripts on astronomy, law, and medicine, drawing scholars from across West Africa and beyond. Sand carried on the wind settles into every crack and doorway. The rustling above continues without pause, a dry whisper moving from one roof to the next long after the streets below have gone still. Notice your breath now, without trying to change it. Let it arrive on its own, and let it leave a little slower than it came. Each exhale can grow longer than the one before, unhurried, unforced, simply allowed. There is no need to count them or hold them in place. Just let the air move through you the way it has moved through every sleeping body across every one of these old and far-off cities, tonight and every night before. Varanasi's river laps against stone steps worn smooth by generations of pilgrims descending toward the water. This city along the Ganges has drawn the faithful for thousands of years, its ghats lined with temples and cremation grounds alike. At this hour, the current runs dark and unseen, except where faint light catches its edge. Boats rest tied to iron rings along the bank. The water keeps its own rhythm, patient with every century that has come to kneel beside it. In the royal stables of Pataliputra, chained elephants shift their weight from foot to foot within the darkened enclosure. This city, capital of the Mauryan Empire under rulers such as Chandragupta and later Ashoka, kept these animals for both ceremony and war, tended by keepers who slept nearby on straw mats. Iron links click softly against wooden posts as the great animals settle. Their breathing fills the stable air, slow and heavy, matching the stillness of the sleeping city beyond its walls. Beneath Mohenjo-Daro's streets, covered drains carry runoff from courtyards toward the outskirts of the city. This settlement of the Indus Valley civilization built its brick channels with a precision that still puzzles archaeologists studying its ruins today. Water moves through these narrow passages long after the households above have gone dark. The gurgle rises faintly through stone covers, an unseen current beneath a sleeping grid of streets. Arapa's granaries hold stores of wheat and barley behind thick mud brick walls. This twin city to Mohenjo-Daro managed food surplus on a scale that supported thousands of residents through lean seasons. In the dark storerooms, rats move unseen between grain sacks, their small claws scratching against woven baskets. No lamp burns here at this hour. The scurrying continues low and constant, a small disturbance within the city's larger stillness. Deep within the palace at Knossos, corridors twist and double back through room after room. This Bronze Age site on Crete, with its painted frescoes and storage magazines, gave rise to later Greek legends of a labyrinth built to hide a monstrous creature. At night, the sound of dripping water somewhere in the stonework travels oddly through these passages, bouncing between walls until its source becomes impossible to place. The palace holds the sound, the way a shell holds an echo. Beyond Mycenae's Lion Gate, wolves call to one another across the dark hills of the Argolide. This fortified citadel, home to Bronze Age kings remembered later in the poems of Homer, sits high on a rocky ridge overlooking the plain below. The gate's carved lionesses stand watch over an entrance now closed for the night. Their howling drifts up from the valley in intervals, distant enough to seem almost part of the wind. At their posts along Sparta's boundaries, sentries trade brief words to confirm one another's identity. This city, organized around military training from boyhood, kept watch through the night with a discipline for which it was known across Greece. The exchanged passwords stay low, barely rising above a murmur, meant to carry only as far as the next post. Beyond them, the countryside lies open and dark, unmarked by walls the Spartans famously chose not to build. Off Corinth's harbor, a bell buoy marks the channel for ships arriving after dark. This city, positioned on the narrow isthmus connecting mainland Greece to the Peloponnese, thrived on trade passing between two seas. The bell clangs each time a swell lifts and drops it, an irregular rhythm shaped entirely by the water's motion. On shore, the sound reaches sleeping households as a distant, intermittent note, easy to mistake for something dreamed rather than heard. High above the sleeping city, wind moves through the standing columns of the Acropolis. This rocky outcrop, crowned by temples built in the 5th century before the Common Era, rises above the streets of Athens like a stone island. At night, the air passing between the fluted marble columns produces a low, hollow whistle, shifting in pitch as gusts change direction. The sound carries down toward the agora, thin and constant above the quieter rooftops below. Past the sleeping insulae of Rome, the Tiber River continues its steady course toward the sea. These crowded apartment blocks, some rising several stories above narrow streets, housed much of the city's population within walking distance of the water. The river's current makes a low, continuous sound as it moves past stone embankments and wooden landings. Few windows show any light at this hour. The water alone seems awake, carrying on with its old and unbroken work. Feel the weight settle into your legs now, heavier than before, as though the mattress has risen slightly to meet them. Let that heaviness travel upward, through the hips, into the lower back, spreading like warmth held in stone after a long day of sun. Your shoulders can sink next, then your arms, resting fully, asking nothing of you. Even your eyelids carry weight now, soft and low, content to stay closed. There is only this, the body held, and the slow settling of sleep. In the bakeries of Pompeii, ovens are stoked well before the sky begins to lighten. This city near the Bay of Naples, later preserved beneath layers of ash from Vesuvius, held dozens of such bakeries identified by their millstones and brick hearths. Bakers feed wood into the fires, while the streets outside remain dark and empty. The smell of heated brick begins to drift out through open doorways. By the time neighbors wake, the ovens will already hold their first loaves. Wooden wheels rattle over Roman paving stones as bread carts move toward the markets before the first light. These carts, loaded with loaves baked through the night, travel routes fixed by custom and by law, since heavy traffic was once banned from daytime streets. Mules pull the carts past shuttered shops and sleeping dogs curled in doorways. Their creaking axles announce the coming day long before any voice does. Canal locks in Babylon groan, as farmers worked the sluice gates before sunrise. The city's fields depended on channels drawn from the Euphrates, their wooden gates raised and lowered to control the flow. Wet ropes strain against worn timber, and water rushes through with a low, steady roar. Farmers stand ankle deep in mud, guiding the current toward furrows that will soon catch the morning sun. Roosters across Nineveh begin to crow, marking the nearness of dawn. Their calls rise from courtyards and rooftop pens scattered through the Assyrian capital, echoing off mud-brick walls still cool from the night. One bird answers another, then another, until the sound spreads through the whole quarter. Inside houses, sleepers stir, but do not yet rise, listening to the familiar signal of a night nearly finished. Fishermen along Alexandria's harbor push their boats onto the water before the sky has fully lightened. Wooden hulls scrape against the sand, and ropes are cast off from stone moorings near the base of the great lighthouse. Nets folded and mended the evening before lie ready at the bow. Oars dip quietly into water, still holding the last darkness of the night, drawing the boats out past the harbor mouth. Inside Jerusalem's temple courts, priests prepare the fires for the morning sacrifice. This daily offering, described in ancient Jewish texts, required wood arranged with care upon the great altar before the sun cleared the hills. Attendants carry bundles of cedar and fig wood across stone paving, still damp with dew. Flames catch slowly, then steady, filling the courtyard with warmth and the scent of burning wood well before the gates open to worshippers. Pots clatter into place as Ephesus's market stalls are set up before the light fully arrives. Vendors arrange rows of clay vessels, baskets of grain, and folded cloth along the colonnaded street leading toward the great temple. Wooden trestle tables scrape against worn stone as they're dragged into position. The clatter grows steadily, stall by stall, until the whole marketplace hums with the small business of preparation. Along Carthage's harbor, dockworkers load ships before the sun has risen over the water. Amphorae filled with oil and wine are carried down stone ramps and stacked carefully within the curved hulls of merchant vessels. Ropes creak as cargo nets swing overhead. Foremen call brief instructions across the dim harbor, their voices carrying easily over the hush of resting water and idle gulls still asleep on the breakwater. Oxen groan under the yoke as carts creak toward the fields outside Ur. Farmers guide the animals along dirt tracks worn smooth by generations of the same daily crossing. The carts carry tools, seed baskets, and water jars wrapped in cloth against the coming heat. Behind them, the ziggurat's dark silhouette still rises against the sky, only just beginning to pale at its eastern edge. Bells on the necks of camels ring out as early caravans pass through the gates of Damascus. Merchants check their loads one final time, tightening ropes around bundled cloth and jars of oil before urging the animals forward into the waking street. The bell's irregular, jingling fades gradually as the caravan moves beyond the walls, swallowed by the wide stretch of road heading east toward the desert. Somewhere beyond the window, a low hum rises and fades, carried on wind that finds no obstacle worth remembering. It swells for a moment against the eaves, then falls away again as though the night itself were breathing. Let your own breath match that rhythm now, rising gently, falling without effort, needing no attention to continue. The sound outside will keep returning, faint and unhurried, asking nothing of you but rest. Stay here, in this soft rise and fall, and let sleep find its own way in. A single voice rises over Baghdad's rooftops, calling the first prayer before daylight touches the domes. The muezzin climbs a narrow minaret stair, worn smooth by years of the same ascent. His words drift across courtyards, over the Tigris, and into rooms where lamps still burn low. Below, a handful of early risers pause mid-step, turning toward the sound as the sky above the round city begins its slow shift from black to gray. Wooden mallets strike the great drum tower of Chang'an, marking the end of the night curfew. The sound rolls across the grid of avenues, waking watchmen who have stood at their posts since dusk. Gatekeepers begin loosening the heavy bars across the city's inner doors. Somewhere a cartwheel groans, testing the newly opened street, while lantern light along the Vermilion Bird Avenue starts to thin against the coming gray. Bronze bells sound from temple halls scattered across Kyoto's hills, calling monks to their first prayers of the day. The tones overlap and fade, one temple answering another across the misted valley. Robed figures move along stone paths still damp with night air, their sandals barely audible. Inside darkened halls, incense smoke curls upward past painted screens, and the last stars fade behind Higashiyama's silhouette. Near the Hippodrome, Constantinople's bakers stoke their ovens back to life, the crackle of burning wood filling narrow lanes behind the stands. Flour dust settles over worn wooden counters as loaves are shaped by hand in the dim light. Steam rises through cracked shutters into streets still empty of crowds. Somewhere beyond the racing track's curved wall, gulls begin circling the harbor, drawn by the first warm scent of bread. On the great platforms of Teotihuacan, priests raise their voices to welcome the rising sun. Their chants rise from the base of the Pyramid of the Sun, echoing across the wide avenue once called the Street of the Dead. Copal smoke drifts upward in thin ribbons, catching the earliest light. Feathered headdresses stir faintly in the morning air as the stone city, still shadowed at its edges, begins to glow along its highest terraces. Across Tenochtitlan's canals, vendors push their canoes toward the great market of Tlatelolco before the sun clears the mountains. Baskets of maize, chili, and woven cloth balance carefully along narrow wooden hulls. Paddles dip in steady rhythm through still water, sending ripples past floating garden plots. Voices call briefly between passing boats, arranging space at the docks, while the city's causeways remain nearly empty beneath the pale early sky. At Cahokia, drums begin to sound from the great plaza as the sunrise ceremony gathers its first participants. The rhythm builds slowly, carried outward across the flattened earth toward the mounds rising on every side. Figures climb the packed earth stairways of Monk's Mound, facing east where the horizon has just begun to brighten. Wood smoke drifts from small fires lit at the base of the platforms, mingling with the cool river air. Elephants trumpet near Angkor's outer causeways as monks step out to begin their morning rituals. The animals' calls echo briefly against carved stone towers still dark with night's dampness. Barefoot monks move along moss-covered walkways, their saffron robes catching the first thin light breaking over the surrounding jungle. Water in the temple moats lies undisturbed, mirroring towers that have stood through centuries of the same returning dawn. Royal trumpets sound across Persepolis, their long notes carrying over terraces of carved stone toward the approaching dawn. Guards straighten at their posts along the Apadana's grand staircase, armor catching the first pale light. The sound rolls past reliefs of tribute, bearers frozen mid-procession, figures carved in stone who have faced this same sunrise for centuries without moving. Beyond the palace, the plain stretches wide and still under a slowly lightening sky. Near Petra's sandstone cliffs, caravans stir their camels for an early departure before the desert heat can rise. Merchants tighten ropes around bundled goods while animals shift and grumble beneath their loads. Hooves click against the worn stone of the Sikh, the narrow passage that has guided travelers into the city for generations. Behind them, the carved facade of the treasury glows faintly rose-colored as the first true light reaches its columns. Let warmth begin now at your feet, spreading upward like sunlight, moving across a wooden floor. Feel it settle into your ankles, your calves, loosening every small knot of tension held there. It rises through your knees, into your thighs, filling each muscle with a heavy golden ease. Let it climb into your chest, your shoulders, your arms, until your hands rest open and warm. Even your jaw, your eyelids grow warm and unguarded now. Rest inside this warmth. Nothing is required of you but to receive it. Palmyra's water wheels begin turning as the first light reaches the oasis. Wooden paddles dip into the irrigation channels fed by the AK spring, lifting water toward groves of date palms and fig trees. The creak of axles rolls across courtyards, still shadowed by colonnaded streets. Farmers guide the flow with worn wooden gates, directing it toward fields that have depended on this same spring for generations. Merchants pause near the colonnade, listening to the sound that has marked morning in this desert city for centuries. Fishermen at Ctesiphon wade into the shallow edges of the Tigris as morning light spreads across the water. Their nets, woven from flax, arc outward and settle beneath the current with a low splash. Reed boats bob nearby, tethered to wooden stakes driven into the muddy bank. Beyond them rises the great arch of the Sicinian palace, its brickwork catching the first warmth of day. The river carries the same silt it has carried for centuries, indifferent to the empires built along its banks. Hammer strikes ring out across Xinjiang as blacksmiths begin their work at daybreak. Charcoal fires glow inside low brick forges, heating iron blades and farming tools destined for markets beyond the city walls. Sparks scatter briefly against the dim morning air before fading into ash. Apprentices work the bellows in steady rhythm, feeding flame into metal that will soon be hammered into shape. The clang carries down narrow lanes, where officials once organized workshops that helped unify the empire's tools and measures. Morning sutras rise from Luoyang's temple halls as monks gather before the day's first light fully breaks. Their voices move in low unison, filling wooden corridors scented with old incense and lamp oil. Prayer beads click lightly between fingers worn smooth by years of repetition. Sunlight edges through paper screens, touching statues that have watched over this hall since the city became a center of Buddhist learning. Outside, the streets remain hushed, waiting for the temple bells to finish their work. Birdsong fills Nara's palace gardens as the sun edges over the surrounding hills. Sparrows and thrushes move through plum trees, planted near wooden verandas, their calls threading through the mist, still resting on the ponds. Deer, considered messengers of the gods in this city, graze near the garden's edge, unhurried by the stirring day. Court attendants cross covered walkways, their footsteps light against timber floors polished by centuries of careful use. The gardens hold the same stillness they held when the city served as Japan's capital. Conch shells sound across Anuradhapura, calling monks and townspeople to the morning alms round. The deep tone rolls past the city's great stupas, brick domes rising pale against the brightening sky. Villagers step from their homes, carrying bowls of rice and curry, walking toward robed monks gathered along dusty paths. The sound has called this same ritual for centuries, since the city stood as a center of early Buddhist practice on the island. Birds scatter briefly from the trees, lining the processional route. Macaws screech through Tickle's canopy as sunlight begins to reach the tops of the tallest temples. Their calls carry across limestone plazas, still damp with overnight moisture, echoing between pyramids rising above the surrounding jungle. Mist clings low to the forest floor, slow to lift beneath the dense canopy overhead. Priests and attendants move along raised causeways connecting temple groups, their sandals brushing against stone worn smooth by generations of ceremonial passage. The forest hums with a chorus that has greeted sunrise here for centuries. Priests atop Chichen Itza's temples raise conch horns to greet the rising sun, The low tone rolls across the great ball court and the stepped pyramid later visitors would call El Castillo. Feathered headdresses catch the first color spreading over the flat Yucatan horizon. Below, the sacred cenote lies still and dark, its waters holding centuries of offerings left by generations who came before. The horn's call marks a passage between night and day that has repeated here since long before outsiders ever saw the city. Herders at Great Zimbabwe call their cattle out toward the morning pasture, their voices carrying across stone-walled enclosures built without mortar centuries ago. Cattle shift and low, moving through narrow stone passages that once directed both people and livestock through the settlement's terraced hillside. Granite boulders, smoothed by wind and rain, rise around the walls like natural sentries. Smoke drifts up from cooking fires inside the great enclosure, mixing with the cool air of the plateau morning. The herds move outward, following paths worn into the earth by countless earlier mornings. A muezzin's voice rises over Timbuktu's flat rooftops as the call to prayer opens across the city. Mud brick minarets, their surfaces ribbed with wooden support beams, catch the day's first light along the edge of the Sahara. Scholars and traders alike pause in their courtyards, facing the same direction their ancestors faced for centuries. Sand dust hangs low over the narrow streets, settling on doorways carved with old geometric patterns. The sound travels far in the dry morning air, reaching camel yards at the city's edge. Somewhere, a single lamp burns lower, its flame thinning into a last curl of smoke before it disappears. Let your shoulders sink a little further into whatever holds you now. There is no need to follow the flame's last flicker, only to notice it fading, the way thoughts fade when the mind finally lets go. Each breath grows longer than the last, unhurried, without counting. Rest here, in that small dimming light, and let it carry you down into sleep. Bells ring out along Varanasi's ghats as priests begin the sunrise puja beside the Ganges. Stone steps, worn smooth by generations of bare feet, lead down to water already dotted with small boats. Brass bells swing in practiced rhythm, their sound mixing with the murmur of chanted verses. Marigold petals float near the shore, remnants of offerings made through the night. Smoke curls upward from small fires tended along the riverbank, thin against the pale morning sky. Town criers move through Pataliputra's streets, announcing that the dawn market has opened for trade. Their voices carry between timber buildings lining the wide road's megasthenes once described to Greek readers. Vendors unroll mats along the roadside, arranging baskets of grain, cloth, and clay vessels. Ox carts creak past, wheels catching in the packed earth, ruts worn by years of passing traffic. The capital of the Mauryan Empire stirs fully awake, its markets filling with the low hum of bargaining voices. Potters in Mohenjo-daro set their wheels spinning again as the workday begins along the city's brick-paved lanes. Clay dust settles on wooden platforms where finished pots dry beside covered kilns. The steady creak of turning wheels drifts through narrow alleys between the tightly fitted brick houses. Nearby, the Indus flows past the city's edge, its waters already carrying the first boats of the morning. Workshops that fell silent overnight return once more to the same low circular rhythm. Carts belonging to Harappa's traders creak steadily toward the city gates, loaded with goods bound for distant markets. Wooden wheels bound in leather grind against the packed roadway leading past the city's massive brick walls. Bullocks pull with slow, even steps, their bells swinging softly against wooden yokes. Guards near the gate watch the procession pass, exchanging brief words with drivers they recognize from earlier journeys. Beyond the walls, the road stretches toward the river plains where caravans have traveled for generations. Horns sound across Knossos as the great gates of the palace complex swing open for the new day. The deep tone rolls through storerooms, stacked with painted jars once filled with oil and grain. Frescoed corridors, their walls patterned with leaping figures and marine motifs, stand quiet before the day's activity begins. Officials move along stone passages toward workshops and archives housed within the sprawling structure. Outside, the Cretan coastline catches the first full light of morning. Pipes carried by shepherds near Mycenae echo faintly as flocks are led out toward the morning pasture. Their simple melodies drift over hillsides, scattered with olive trees and low stone walls. The citadel's massive lion gate stands behind them, its carved relief catching the slanting early light. Goats and sheep move in loose lines along paths worn into the dry earth, bells clinking softly at their necks. The sound of the pipes fades gradually as the flocks descend into the valley below. Shouted commands mark the start of dawn training for boys enrolled in Sparta's agoge. Instructors call out drills across an open field bordered by simple stone structures. Boys move through exercises meant to build endurance, their bare feet raising dust from ground still cool with night air. Older youths oversee younger ones following a system the historian Xenophon later described in detail. The routine repeats each morning, part of an upbringing meant to shape citizens for the demands of Spartan life. Cranes along Corinth's Harbor Creek as workers begin loading morning cargo onto waiting ships. Wooden beams groan under the weight of amphorae filled with oil and wine, swung carefully over the water's edge. The city's twin harbors, linking trade routes across the Aegean and Ionian seas, already hum with activity. Dock workers call instructions to one another as ropes tighten and loosen with each lift. Merchant vessels rock gently against the stone quay, waiting their turn to receive the goods. Clay jugs click together as water carriers gather before dawn light at the public fountains of Athens. The lion-headed spouts release a steady stream into waiting vessels, echoing off marble basins worn smooth by generations of hands. Slaves and free citizens alike wait their turn, exchanging brief words about the day ahead. Donkeys stand nearby, ready to carry the filled jugs uphill toward home still shuttered against the morning chill. The sound repeats at fountain after fountain across the city. Rome's 7 hills answer each other as cockerels, crow almost in unison across the waking city. The sound rises from the Palatine, the Aventine, the Caelian, carried on cool air before the sun clears the rooftops. Insulae, stacked 5 stories high, begin to stir, shutters creaking open one by one. Somewhere, a baker's oven already glows, its heat leaking into the alley below. The overlapping crowing fades as the true noise of the city takes hold. Let the face rest now, the way a lamp rests once its wick has burned low. Feel the jaw loosen, the small muscles around the mouth letting go of any shape they were holding. The eyelids grow heavy, pressing down like folded cloth, until closing them takes no effort at all. Behind those closed eyes there is only a soft, dark room, wide and unlit, asking nothing of you. Stay there a while, in that dim space behind your own eyes, and let it hold you. Morning greetings ripple through Pompeia's forum as shopkeepers and officials cross its paved stones. Men in togas nod to one another beneath the colonnades, their voices blending with the scrape of sandals on limestone. Vendors near the basilica arrange baskets of bread and dried fruit for the day's trade. A magistrate's attendant passes with a scroll under his arm, heading toward the building where local business will soon be conducted. The forum, framed by temples and shops, fills gradually with the ordinary hum of a town beginning its day. Criers move through Rome's forum, announcing the day's proceedings to anyone within earshot. Their voices carry news of Senate business, court cases, and public notices posted near the rostra. Citizens gather in small clusters to listen, some jotting notes on wax tablets, others simply passing on their way to work. The curia's heavy doors stand open, senators arriving in slow procession beneath the watchful gaze of temple statues. The crier's calls repeat at intervals, ensuring the message reaches every corner of the crowded square. Temple gates in Babylon creak open on their bronze hinges to admit the first worshippers of the day. Priests in linen robes move along the processional way once decorated with glazed brick lions, their sandals scuffing dust from stones laid centuries before. Offerings of grain and oil wait near the inner shrine, prepared for the morning rites to Marduk. Early visitors bow their heads at the threshold, murmuring words passed down through generations. The gates remain open through the morning, admitting a slow trickle of the faithful. Shields clash together as Nineveh's royal guards complete their change of shift outside the palace gates. The outgoing watch hands over spears and torches to fresh soldiers, their bronze armor catching the early light. Stone reliefs lining the gateway depict lions and winged figures, silent witnesses to the ritual repeated every morning without fail. Officers exchange brief reports on the night's quiet before the new guard settles into position. The palace beyond remains still, its inner courtyards not yet stirring with daily business. Horns from Alexandria's harbor sound in long, low notes, signaling ships ready to depart with the morning tide. Sailors haul ropes from the stone quay, while merchants oversee the loading of grain and papyrus bound for distant ports. The great lighthouse stands watch above the harbor mouth, its fire long extinguished now that daylight has arrived. Fishermen's boats slip out ahead of the larger vessels, weaving through the crowded waters. The horns fade as the ships find open sea beyond the breakwater. Trumpets sound from the parapets above Jerusalem's temple, marking the hour for morning worship to begin. The notes carry across rooftops and narrow streets, reaching households still gathering themselves for the day. Priests move through the temple courts preparing vessels and incense for the sacrifice already underway. Pilgrims climbing the stone steps pause at the sound, some quickening their pace toward the gates. The city below stirs fully now, drawn upward by the same call that has echoed there for generations. Murmured debate fills Ephesus's great theater as citizens gather on its curved stone tiers before the day's business begins. Voices discuss trade routes, temple matters, and news carried in by ships from across the Aegean. The theater, cut into the hillside and facing the harbor road, holds thousands when full, though morning brings only scattered groups. Sunlight climbs slowly over the marble seats, warming stones still cool from the night. Their conversation carries easily up through the tiers, the theater's shape gathering every word. Vendors in Carthage's market call out the morning prices, their voices layering over one another beneath awnings of dyed cloth. Fresh olives, salted fish, and pottery jars line the stalls as buyers weave between them, haggling in low, practiced tones. The harbor lies close by, its ships now unloading cargo that will fill these same stalls within the hour. Dust rises faintly from the packed earth underfoot as carts arrive from the countryside. Business in this city has always moved at the pace of its harbor tides. Scribes in Ura bend over damp clay tablets, pressing reed styluses into the surface to record the day's first transactions. Grain deliveries, wool exchanges, and temple offerings are noted in careful wedge-shaped marks before the clay can dry and harden. Their workroom sits near the ziggurat's base, lit by narrow windows that catch the low morning sun. Baskets of unmarked tablets wait nearby, ready for the day's business to fill them. What they write today will still be read thousands of years from now. In Damascus, merchants unroll bolts of fabric across their stalls as the souk stirs into its daily rhythm. Silk, wool, and dyed cotton unfurl in long ribbons of color beneath the covered walkways. Shopkeepers arrange their goods with practiced hands, calling greetings to neighbors setting up beside them. Sunlight filters through the wooden lattice overhead, striping the stone floor with thin bands of light. The scent of spices from a nearby stall drifts through the narrow passage, mingling with dust and cloth. Let your breath find its own slow measure now, without effort, without counting. Each inhale arrives quietly, and each exhale grows a little longer than the one before it. There is no need to hurry the next breath along. It will come when it is ready, the way morning comes to a city that has waited through the dark. Let the exhale stretch out like a thread, unspooling, longer, looser, until the space between breaths feels wide enough to rest inside. On the Tigris near Baghdad, canal boats begin their morning passage, oars dipping and splashing in steady rhythm. Boatmen guide loads of dates, grain, and pottery toward the city's covered markets. The water reflects a pale sky still shedding its night color. Reeds along the bank bend under the boat's gentle wake, and herons lift briefly before settling again. These same waterways once carried scholars, silk, and paper toward the house of wisdom, though this morning they carry only breakfast goods. Heavy wooden gates in Shangjian Creek open at the appointed hour, allowing merchants to stream into the city with their loaded carts. Guards inspect goods briefly before waving traders through the massive walls. Camels laden with silk and spices from the western roads mingle with local farmers bringing vegetables to market. The wide avenues beyond the gate stretch out in careful grid lines, already filling with foot traffic. Dust rises from the road as the city's daily rhythm resumes in full. Silk robes rustle softly as court officials gather in Kyoto for the morning assembly, their layered garments catching the light of paper lanterns not yet extinguished. Attendants arrange scrolls and writing implements along low wooden tables inside the hall. Officials bow to one another in practiced sequence before settling into their designated places. Outside, garden paths remain damp with morning dew, and distant temple bells still linger in the cool air. The assembly begins, as it has for generations, in careful, unhurried order. Bells ring out from Constantinople's harbor as trade ships arrive with the morning tide, their hulls heavy with grain, timber, and cloth from distant provinces. Dock workers gather along the stone quay, ready to unload cargo bound for the city's markets. Gulls circle overhead, drawn by the promise of scraps from unloaded crates. The Golden Horn glimmers under early light, crowded with vessels waiting their turn to dock. Merchants call across the water, arranging deals before the ships have even tied their ropes. Vendors in Teotihuacan's marketplace begin calling out their goods as the sun climbs above the pyramid of the sun. Baskets of maize, woven cloth, and obsidian tools line the wide avenue leading toward the sacred precinct. Buyers move between stalls, examining goods laid out on woven mats spread across the stone pavement. The air carries the scent of roasted maize and copal incense drifting from nearby shrines. Trade here has long connected distant regions, goods passing through this city on their way to places its people would never see. Canoes fill the canals of Tenochtitlan, paddles dipping in steady rhythm as traders move goods toward the great market at Tlatelolco. Chinampa farmers guide boats loaded with vegetables and flowers grown on floating garden plots. Voices call out greetings across the water, while children watch from footbridges overhead. Reflections of temple platforms ripple across the canal surface as the city fully wakes. The hum of paddles and murmured trade fills the waterways, a sound as old as the city itself. Cahokia's morning chants rise from the central plaza as the sun clears the tree line east of the great mounds. Singers gather near the base of Monk's Mound, their voices carrying across the open grass toward smaller earthworks scattered along the river bottom. Wood smoke drifts from cooking fires set along the plaza's edge. Children run between platforms while elders lead the chant in call and response. The Mississippi lies close by, wide and brown, carrying the sound outward over the water. Angkor's stone courtyards fill with the footsteps of monks moving between the temple's outer galleries. Saffron-colored robes brush against carved sandstone walls worn smooth by centuries of passing feet. Bare soles tap softly across sunlit flagstones, still cool from the night. Reflecting pools near the causeway hold the temple's towers upside down in still water. Somewhere within the galleries, a single bell answers each footstep with a faint, lingering note. Timbuktu scholars' voices rise from the Quranic schools scattered near the city's mosques. Students sit cross-legged on woven mats, wooden boards balanced on their knees, repeating verses after their teachers. Sand from the surrounding desert drifts faintly through open doorways, settling on stacked manuscripts bound in leather. Camel bells still echo faintly from the outskirts, where caravans finish their arrival. Inside these mud brick rooms, learning continues as it has for generations, voice answering voice. Varanasi wakes fully now, its bells and chants and river sounds layering into one long, unbroken hum along the Ghats. Priests ring bells in wide arcs, while pilgrims descend stone steps worn thin by countless bare feet. Boats push off from the shore, oars breaking the surface where lamps floated only hours before. Across every city this night has touched, from Rome's sleeping hills to Cahokia's quiet mounds, the same pattern has held: dusk closing gates, midnight holding its watchers, dawn calling everyone back into the light. The moon, that lit Alexandria's harbor and Angkor's stone towers, is the same moon resting now above your own window. The rivers that carried Baghdad's boats and Varanasi's lamps still carry water tonight, somewhere toward the sea. People have always needed this: the closing of a door, the last lamp put out, the long stretch of dark before the world stirs again. Let that old rhythm carry you now. Sleep well.